Hello everyone and welcome to this live stream in which we will talk about how to create 360-degree panoramas. I am Greenie, this is Greenbox. Before we go into what's going to happen over the next 30 to 40 minutes, I want to thank Restream for bringing today's live stream to you. We are using the Restream Live Studio today to do this entire live stream, so everything you are about to see is done within a web browser. So if you want to try it yourself and just start streaming from your web browser, go and try it yourself by clicking to the link in the video description down below and signing up for a free Restream account. All right, everyone, hello, nice to have you. In the course of the next 30 to 40 minutes, I will walk you through the entire process which it takes to create high resolution 360 panoramas from the beginning to the end. So what exactly is a 360-degree panorama photograph? I think the easiest way to demonstrate this is if we take a close look on my website. And on my website, which, by the way, you of course find in the video description down below, I have a section which is all about 360-degree panorama photography. So what I did, I went to some local amusement parks here in Switzerland and I took photos. So one of those photos, for example, is this 360-degree panorama. And what the name 360-degree already suggests is this is not only a single image. No, in fact, this is an image which is spanning all around your viewport, like your camera, like where you are standing right now. And you, as the viewer, you have the chance to decide where you want to look at. So it feels for you as if you were at this place. And the thing which is special about the panoramas I do, it's not just using one of those compact action cameras like a GoPro Max or a Insta360 X2. No, in fact, we are using DSLR-style cameras with a high resolution, which allow you to do things like you can zoom in and you still see details, which is a thing that isn't always possible with those compact solutions, as we discussed in videos in which we reviewed those products on my channel. So this is the thing I am going to show you, how to create a panorama just like this one yourself. You can use to showcase a place and move around. For me, the reason why I started doing those panoramas is I like to travel to new places and explore new places. The only thing is, as you might know, Corona happened and traveling isn't really possible for most of us, either due to travel restrictions or financially speaking. So I wanted to bring the joy of exploring new places to the people over the internet. That's why I started creating panoramas and I started to read into how to do that a year ago. And right now I'm at the place where I actually know how this stuff works, and I am about to share everything you need to know to start today with you in the course of the next 25 to 30 minutes. All right, so the thing is, it doesn't really matter how good your camera is. This is like one of the most important messages I want to get out there. Yes, just a moment ago, I said that if you use like one of those small action camera 360-degree photo cameras or video cameras, that you would not get the desired end result, which I just showed you. That's true. But it doesn't matter if you use a camera which is, let's say, $500, or if it's a camera which is $5,000. It doesn't matter, because if you don't know how to use your camera when creating those panoramas, it can be the most expensive camera, your end result will look bad. And that's where I want to introduce you all to the most important piece of gear you need in your travel bag when you want to shoot panorama photos. And this is this thing. This is a panoramic hat. And unlike what you probably would know from your regular photo or video tripod, it's, well, as you might see, it's a little bigger. And I will demonstrate what this thing does in just a second. By the way, the product I'm about to showcase, or at least the product category, is linked in the video description down below. So If you're interested to get into this 360-degree photo creation yourself, you can check that out and you will find all the details down there in the video description. So the biggest enemy you have as someone who creates panoramas is parallax. So what exactly is parallax? I think we all know it from school, but just as a brief refresher, if you close one eye, you use a finger and you look at it, and then you move your head, you will see that the background behind your finger is moving. And this basically describes what parallax is. So if you take a camera, let's for example take my camera I actually use for creating those high resolution panoramas, which is a Sony A7R4, and you just stand on a point and you take a bunch of photos around you, and you expect to stitch them together into one of those panoramas, you will have a bad time simply because you will have parallax, because your camera is moving just as your head was moving around your finger. And this will make it almost impossible in some cases to stitch those photos together because there are just no overlapping areas. So what this thing is doing, unlike a regular tripod, you can mount the camera onto this panoramic head. I'm just about to demonstrate this. And once it's in here, you can use this head to adjust the camera. So let's do this. Let's adjust it towards you guys. Okay, so what I can now do is I can take a photo of what the camera is currently looking at. Then I can move the head around and do multiple photos. And as you might see this while I'm doing this, this tripod is not moving around the body of the camera as it usually would be the case with a regular tripod. No, instead, it's moving around the center, or at the optical center of the lens, which is somewhere around the front glass panel. And what this does is it reduces, or it should eliminate parallax completely, which means no matter in which direction you are looking, the finger and your hair will always be like at the same place. So the background will not move behind your finger. This is what this construction is doing, and this is essential for creating panoramas. So if you have a $200 camera and you have one of these, and you then take your $5,000 camera and you do it freestyle, handheld, trust me, the result of your $200 camera might look better than the result you will get from your $5,000 camera, simply because you accounted for parallax. So this is one of the main messages I want to give you. If you want to go and shoot panoramas, it's important to plan ahead. It's important to know what you're doing, and also it's important to have the tools necessary to shoot those photos. Because we all know it. I'm sure every one of you did this once. Almost every phone these days has a panoramic feature or even a 360-degree sphere feature, which is what we want to do. So you just take a few photos around yourself, and then your phone does some magic and you have a sphere where you can look around. But I'm pretty certain in almost all cases you ever tried this, there were some issues like hard edges and stuff which just wasn't fitting perfectly. This is the prime example of parallax. So using one of those panoramic heads is actually helping to reduce that and have photos which can be easily stitched to a seamless experience. Speaking of this panoramic head, this is one I got myself from AliExpress, and I do not recommend it. It has some issues, but I am able to account for them because I know where the issues are. Instead, I recommend you, if you want to get into 360-degree panoramic creation, don't buy like a cheap head like I did. You're gonna have a bad time. You will have a lot of panoramas which turn out unusable until you worked out the kinks. So what I really want to tell you is maybe consider spending a little bit more money for a premium head, for example from Manfrotto, which is definitely the head I will get myself once this thing is, as soon as this thing breaks in any way, I'm gonna replace it with a new one. but at the moment, this is what I use. So this is the most important piece of software, piece of hardware you need to have at your disposal next to the camera, obviously. So that brings me to the camera. If you are looking for starting creating panoramas, this camera is definitely not the camera I'm recommending for you. In fact, in the video description down below, there is a camera I would recommend to someone who wants to start. It still is, even for someone who wants to start, it is a high-end camera, but this is like a camera I used myself when I started and I had good experience with it, and I know that the camera definitely will not be the issue when you do something and it turns out not the way you want. So I am using the Sony a7R IV, which is totally overkill for what you want to do when you start. But the reason I use this one is because it's a resolution monster. And as I showcased before, if we take another look at the panorama I was showcasing before, it just gives you the ability to actually zoom in and have still details, what's not exactly possible with a camera which has less resolution. However, this is pixel peeping at its best. So if you're not a pixel peeping nerd like I am, that's totally overkill, and you will be fine with a camera with a lower resolution. However, what you will need to have at your disposal is a wide angle lens. So let's get back to me here for a moment. I am using the Sony 12 to 24 millimeter lens. It is not exactly the cheapest lens out there, but I had very good experiences with it. I know there are cheaper alternatives which are manual focus and stuff like that from Rokinon, from Sigma, and other brands, and they all work. They all work for creating high resolution panoramas. The reason why I got this one is simply because I am a fan of wide angle lenses, and I was planning to also use this lens in my regular photography. And in my regular photography, I really need autofocus. So speaking of autofocus, if you create those panoramas, if you go around with your head from left to right, up and down, you want to have your camera settings all set to manual. You do not want to have any variation between one photo and the next one. So you have to set your shutter speed, you have to set your ISO, you have to set your white balance, you have to set everything. There should be no variation between photos, because if there is variation between photos, you will notice this if you go into panorama, and it will not look as clean and uniform as it should be. This is something. If you set up your panorama, make sure that your camera is set up properly, the focus is set so it works everywhere, your white balance is set, and all the settings are ready to go. The worst thing you can do is you go somewhere where you shoot the most beautiful panorama, let's say of a beautiful mountain landscape, and in the end you cannot use it because one photo looks totally different than the other, and in the panorama you really realize where the different photos are which you stitched. So, speaking of stitching, I of course prepared a panorama, which we are going to create right now. Of course, I'm not going to walk you through the shooting process because this is just me hitting the shutter button. So if we jump into my computer, I prepared this panorama. It consists of 24 images I took all around me from bottom to top, and we're about to create one continuous 360-degree panorama, which includes all of those 24 photos. To do that, we're using a software called PTGui. Just to give you a heads up, there are a lot of softwares out there which promises to do the same thing. It's basically taking photos, aligning them next to each other, and creating a spherical photo, or in my case, a 360-degree panorama. I tested a lot of those tools. I tested the free versions, I tested premium tools, I tested open source projects. And in the end, PTGui was that tool which just performed the best in case of in terms of user friendliness, in terms of accepting the file formats I'm using, and just being the most performant when it came to stitching. So this is why I myself went with PTGui, which isn't exactly the cheapest version. In fact, I even got the Pro version, and I will talk about why I got the Pro version in just a second. So the first step we have to do here is we can simply drag and drop those photos in here. And right now, for the demonstration, we are working with JPEG files, which were resized to 2000 pixels on the long side. Simply that we don't have to sit here and stare at a processing bar when we're about to process those photos. But usually I use the raw files straight from the camera with its full resolution, and PTGui can work with that just fine. But for today, we're using scaled down, easier to handle pictures. All right, so we now loaded in all the photos, and we see them, they're up here, and they look quite random. And the thing we have to do now is we simply hit one button, which is Align Images. And if we do that, PTGui is going through the images, doing some magic. We talk about this in just a sec. And after a quick moment, the photos are aligned already in a panorama. We can now view in details using the detail view. Right now we're in the panorama editor, which shows us the entire image on the screen. So it basically unfolds the sphere into one equirectangular projection on our screen. This is what we see right now. So we have distortion going on to the top and the bottom. Obviously, that's because we took a sphere and unrolled it. So if we go into the panorama viewer, in the detail viewer, we now see the panorama as it is if we would view it in one of those viewers. And we already see it did a pretty good job, but there is one big issue with this panorama. And this is, behind me, there were people. There were people in the panorama, and I am a fan of having clear panoramas without people in it, which is a hard task to do in an amusement park, which basically lives from people being in the park. So what I did, because I knew I do not want to have those people in my panorama, I knew that. So once I was done with my panorama, I asked those people if they could leave their seat for just a moment so I could take a clean shot of this area. And we're about to fix this area in just a second, but first I want to real quick talk about what PTGui just did and how this entire thing aligned itself so automatically. Because there's nothing I did when shooting the photos with this specific panorama which told PTGui how to handle this. So it's more or less random, but PTGui did a beautiful job of aligning everything. So PTGui works as following. There is something which they call control points. And the software, this is the core thing the software does. The software analyzes each and every photo. And it finds significant details in the photo, significant features in the photo, compares it to other photos, and it will find so-called control points. So all those points, those colorful points in here, represent a feature in both photos which PTGui thinks is at the same place. And if we take a closer look at it, we realize, yes, in fact, all those points are in fact at the same point. So number 4 is at the fence, that's right. Then we have 19 is down there, that's right. We have some feature at those 3 places at the bottom with number 17, that works too. And PTGui does this for all photos, then uses this information to know how to align and orient all those photos, and there you go. Scale this thing up and you have a working sphere. So sometimes there are photos which cannot be automatically aligned because there is moving parts in it or other issues, and we are going to produce one such situation because I'm now going to import 3 more photos. Those are photos of the area without the people after I ask them to leave or just move to the side for a moment. So what I do, I simply go back to our project assistant, which is the first tab. I take those photos, I load them in, and right now nothing will happen because PTGui did never process those photos, so the people are still in here. We could now just simply rerun the process and PTGui would do everything automatically. But just to demonstrate how to manually align photos, I'm going to align 2 of them manually before we then do the rest automatically. So to do that, we go to the control point tab. And in here we have 2 sides to compare the 2 photos, obviously. So on one side, we scroll to the first new photo I loaded in, which is photo number 25. On the second side, we open photo number 26. So those are 2 photos which are taken next to each other, and important, they have overlap. This is something which is very important if you shoot panoramas using this technique, using PTGui. Your photos need to have an overlap, which means you're able to find features in both photos. If those photos were completely isolated from each other, PTGui and yourself, you would probably not have any chance to find out how those 2 photos matching up to each side, unless you have some sort of an automated, motorized panorama head. But those are really a topic for a different time because they are amazing, but also very expensive. So, all right, so what we need to do now is we need to find significant features in those photos. So let's do this by using, let's scroll out and see what can we see in those photos. So those seats, those benches are, I think they're pretty well in both views. So let's go to this recycling bin here. I think it's an ashtray. So let's simply click on the bottom feet there. Let's set 1 control point on the left at that feet, and now find the same feet on the right and click the same position. Right now we have 2 points. So those 2 points, they correspond to each other. But 1 point is not enough to know how to align or even orient a photo, so we need to continue doing that. So let's say next up we have this feature over here where we can see through the bench. Let's go in there, click on this top left corner, find the same top left corner in the other photo, click there too, and that worked too. We have now 2 points which are both in the same photo. And right now PTGui should already be able to find the rest, but just to make sure, we're gonna add a 3rd and 4th one. So let's do the same thing for this feature over here. Let's click there and see, PTGui already automatically found the right spot in the corresponding photo because the 2 points already were enough. However, PTGui clearly says that you should at least have 5 control points in each set of images. So let's add 2 more, but this should be relatively easy since PTGui now knows where we are. So let's say we take this feature in here, in this sculpture, worked perfectly, it knows where we are. And let's do one more test. Let's say we take this feature up here. And PTGui found it. Beautiful. So we now have 5 control points. We could now repeat doing this for all the photos which are corresponding to the photos we just uploaded. This will probably take around 30 to 50 minutes. So we are not gonna do that. Instead, I am going to rerun PTGui and say, please do it automatically as if we did it manually. But this is how you would do it manually if you cannot align them automatically. All right, so what I do, I go to the project and I simply say, align the images one more time. It processes all images again from the beginning, and now we should have the same result as we had before because the images without the people were added before. So what we now have to do is, we now have to tell PTGui that we do not want to have those people in the shot. To do that, we go to the mask editor, and the mask editor is one of the features which are only available in the PTGui Pro version compared to the PTGui standard version. This is the reason why I have chosen to go Pro, because you will see in just a sec, this feature is amazing. And it saves so much time in Photoshop, which you could do it as well in Photoshop, but it's just not as efficient by any means as here. So we go again to the detail view, which is the view which tells you where you are. And if we do a right click on those people, we now see that we have a total of 4 different images at this area, which are overlapping. So I say, okay, we have 26, this is the photo I want to use. We have number 12, which is the photo I don't want to use. So I say the first entry is photo 12 and 26 is exactly what I want. And I say open it in the mask editor. And now we're in the mask editor. And what we can do here is amazing. So I'm going down there and I take the red pen, which tells PTGui which features I do not want to have in my final panorama. So I'm simply going to draw around those people in here and say, let's draw about this entire area. I want to have the seats clear and the people gone. So I'm taking the tool, mark everything as I do not want to have that. And if we go back to the panorama detail viewer, they are already gone. They are gone. Boop, that easy. And this is so amazing. You could export all those layers. We have here all those images aligned to Photoshop as separate layers, and you could do it there with adjusting the layers and doing masks and stuff. It is possible, but come on, you just saw it. It was so easy. So we are pretty much done with that panorama. However, there is one more detail I want to remove, because there is yet another person in the image I want to have removed. So once more, we do a right click on it and we see it's image number 10 and 3. So let's open both images in the mask editor and we do the same thing. We take the pen with the red color, say, I don't want to have this person in my shot. We go back to the detail view and the person is gone. And this is how easy it is to remove details or remove persons or remove something, moving objects, cars, whatever it is in PTGui. Super cool. There's one more thing I want to showcase real quick, and this is if we look straight down, there's my tripod. There is this tripod. And I knew how I want to use my photo, so I did not take a photo of the ground below the tripod, which is something you could do to remove the tripod. Just do masking as we just did, and you would be able to remove the tripod. Instead, I'm going to place a so-called nadir logo, which is basically a circular logo at the bottom of the image, which shows that I have taken this photo. However, there is one thing though I want to showcase, and this is the center of the tripod is empty. It's transparent actually. And the reason for that is there was simply no photo which was showing this area. So I did not shoot any photos straight down to my tripod, because why should I? I don't gonna use that part anyway. However, if you have holes in your panorama, for example, because you had to remove people and there's just like one small intersection where there were people all the time, you can simply fill this in with PTGui by going to the panorama editor, go over to blending and then say fill holes. If we do that, PTGui will process that area and fills it in with something which should match the color more or less. Obviously, it cannot draw the ground below it because there is not enough information to do that. But with that, we can now move on to exporting this panorama and then move on to the last step, which is how can I publish one of those photos on my own website. So to export this panorama, it's really simple. In PTGui, just go to Create Panorama, tell PTGui as what you want to export it. In my case, I want to export it as a JPEG just to save time, but usually I would export it as a Photoshop large file, because the bigger panoramas with it, especially like those gigapixel panorama photos, they are not 360, but they are big. They tend to use up to 300 gigs of space when I create them. And if you want to join me when we create one of those photos, feel free to subscribe to this channel, ring the bell, and make sure to not miss the Monday streams, because on Monday we usually do creative stuff like creating panoramas, 360-degree photos, or other things regarding photography or videography. All right, so we want to save this as a JPEG, and we want to have it with 100% of its size. We could easily resize it over here or here with the dimensions. But for the demonstration, we go with 100%. We're gonna save it next to the files we imported, and we just simply hit Create Panorama. It's creating a panorama, which takes just a few seconds, since, as I said, we use compressed JPEGs for the demonstration. Usually this process takes a little longer depending on the strength of your computer. And in the case of our 18 billion pixel panorama we did, like I think 2 months ago, this process we just saw going through in about 12 seconds took over 8.5 hours. So just to tell you that creating Panorama is not exactly an easy task for your computer. It needs a lot of processing power. Just to be aware of that if you throw like big raw files at the tools, because they use a lot of processing power to be created. All right, so the panorama was created and lies now next to the raw, next to the JPEGs we imported. And if you take a look at it, it again is this weird equirectangular projection, which is basically the sphere unrolled in this flat projection. But that's not an issue. We are going to use a different tool, which is called Krpano, which will take this photo, bring it into a spherical projection, and we will be able to move around freely with our viewport. And to do that, we of course going to start that tool. Krpano is the tool. Again, unfortunately, this also isn't a free tool. It's also a premium tool. But again, as with PTGui, there are multiple tools which promise to do similar things. But in the end, Krpano just was the tool which did all the things I needed a tool to do, and it's just super easy to use, and the online documentation is just outstanding. So if you are somewhat of a developer or you have some basic understanding of creating HTML code, CSS code, and XML in general, you will have a good time customizing your panorama viewing experience. Okay, so all you need to know about this tool, because we cannot go into more detail in this stream, because that would probably take an entire different stream. But we now need to take our photo, our panorama we just created, drop it in Krpano, and I myself, for my website, kosherpics.com, I created a custom template which tells the tool how to work with those images. But for the sake of demonstration, we just go with one of the default configs, which is so-called normal config. This is basically the basics. It's like nothing fancy, it just works. And let's do that. So let's click on processing images now. Again, since we worked with a reduced sized panorama, this happened in about 8 seconds. And the bigger files we do sometimes take up to 2 hours to process. So as I said, Panorama, not exactly an easy task for your computer. So what this tool now did, it created this folder, which has the name of your image. And in here, you will find some HTML files, some XML files, and this is basically the folder you could now upload to your website, to your online drive, and people going to that URL would be able to see it. So let me demonstrate this, because because Krpano includes a local test server in the normal config, which is nice to test things, but you can remove that from your specific config if you do a custom config. So let's see how this would actually look like over here. This is the panorama as it was created by Krpano. We can move around. We can zoom out, we can zoom in, and we see the person at the back is gone and the people over here is gone. So just as we processed it, and if we look down, we now see this weird tripod with this blending, which isn't really working out well, because as I said, I haven't taken a photo of the area below the tripod. So a last thing I want to show you now is how you can simply customize your panorama using Krpano to create things like what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a logo down there which tells the viewer that I did the photo and where he can find more photos. So to do that, we simply need a text editor. And this is the moment where you, of course, have to do your own research. You have to go through the documentation and find out what you want to do yourself. But in my case, I already prepared a simple logo, which is in here. Let's take this resource folder and paste it into the folder created by Krpano. The resource folder includes the logo we're about to place. And then there is this little piece of XML code which we need to add to the Pano, and I'm about to show you how this is done and what it does. So Krpano created this entire folder with all the files, and one of those files is the Pano XML file. And the Pano XML file is pretty simple, and I will just give you a rough idea, just to get you a rough idea what's going on here. The first line over here is telling the software what kind of UI, what kind of skin you want to have. The skin are those buttons down there below, where you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can go to the right, to the left. That's the skin. You can customize it, and to customize it, you then put your customized one over here. The view settings, that tells the viewer how you want to start your panorama. So if we refresh it, we're looking in this direction. We can change that by changing this line. The next thing is the preview. The preview currently isn't in use, but if we create panoramas with multiple viewports where you can move around, you use the preview to distinguish one from another in the panorama selection. Basically, image, that's simply the actual image. That's basically the panorama is stored in here. And what we are about to do, we're about to add a few new lines here, which is this thing. And what this thing does, it is creating a hotspot. And the hotspot in Krpano is basically a spot where something is happening at a specific coordinate. And we're going to define that here. We're saying, hey, here are the coordinates. That's where it is. We want to add a PNG file, which is placed in the resource folder we just copied before, and we're going to call this entire thing not your logo. That's just like for internal use. Then the last thing we have to define is what happens when we click on the logo, and in my case it simply opens a website which is called coasterpix.com, which, you guessed it, is the website I use to host all of my work. And the last thing over here is basically and this is an additional thing I did, which does orient the logo according to our viewport. So let's save this file. Let's save it. Let's go back to our viewer in the web browser. Let's refresh. And once we refreshed and we look down, we see there is my logo, which covers the tripod we had there. And if I move around, the logo is always facing me. That was the last thing. And if I click on it, you get over to coasterpix.com, where you can find all my other panorama work I did. And that's really as simple as it is to create panoramas. Sure, this was a best case scenario where we took a good panoramic head, which removes parallax. We had a good stitch there for it was easy to remove the people, because I knew that I want to do that. So I asked the people to move out of the way so I can take a clear shot. So yeah, this was like one of the best case scenarios, but it should give you all the knowledge you need about the workflow to know how you can do it yourself. Again, most important thing is to eliminate parallax, which is done with one of those tripods. And the rest is really just understanding software and practicing. Once more, all the necessary tools and hardware parts you need to create panoramas yourself, you will find in the video description down below. And if you liked what we just did here, please make sure to let me know by liking the video and letting me know in the comment section down below. And if you have any questions regarding anything we just did in this video, feel free to write a comment, or if you want to hop on a call with me, simply shoot me an email. You find my business email down there in the video description as well, and we can work out a custom workflow for you and your needs in case you have a customer or a client who wants to have high resolution panoramas. All right, everyone, thanks for watching this live stream / video on demand. I am Greeny, this is Greenbox. Once more, thanks for Restream for bringing this live stream to you. We use the Restream Live Studio to do this, and you are now welcome to click one of those 2 videos here on the end card. I'm Greeny, this is Greenbox. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in one of those videos now on the end card. Bye!